Shemai, and welcome back to the Senedd Explains podcast. I'm Gwion, one of the co-founders, and I'm here with...
Hi, I'm Maddy. I swore I wouldn't come on this podcast because I did start Senedd Explain with Gwion, but I spend all my time doing the socials, which, as you might see if you follow our socials, is kind of a big job. So I did sort of say I wouldn't step on the podcast, but today's kind of a good week to come on the podcast. So already 2 episodes in, I've broken my promise, and I'm happy to be here today.
Well, thanks, Maddy, for taking time off your busy social media grind to come on the podcast. Today we'll be discussing in our second episode the 2 budgets that we've seen from the UK Government and the Welsh Government, both with huge implications for Wales, and also the big divisions that are within Welsh Labour just 5 months away from the Senedd election. So to start off, 2 weeks ago we had the UK Government budget by the Chancellor Rachel Reeves. It's a time when UK government finances are under so much pressure and the UK economy is not doing particularly well, which means that there are even more difficult decisions to make when there is so much that needs repairing within society. We saw £505 million extra pounds for the Welsh Government, both in resource spending, that is spending from day to day on things like salaries, and then around £200 million in capital spending, so that's spending on things like infrastructure for the Welsh Government to spend money on. We also saw more money being allowed to be borrowed by the Welsh Government, which could be very, very important for the next Welsh Government that comes in after 2026. We also saw the 2-child benefit cap being lifted, which meant that 20,000 more children are now eligible to have benefits claimed for them by their families. And that'll mean many, many families being lifted above the poverty line. Maddy, I think it's been fantastic to see the 2-child benefit cap being lifted. Particularly Wales is, of course, one of the poorest parts of the UK and will have disproportionate levels of child poverty. What have you seen with the reaction on social media about this?
Yeah, so I think, to be honest, it felt like this was a really drawn out process. There was no big shock that this has happened because it's like how a lot of things with the UK government is moving at the moment. It seems to be quite like based on, they seem to do something, wait for the wider traditional press and media reaction, and then there starts to be hints that maybe it's not going to happen, and then eventually, they make that decision whether or not it does happen. I think this happened with this. Maybe if it had been a quicker response a few months ago when the initial backlash came, it would have been a bit more, it would have felt a bit more substantial. But I do feel like this has sort of been a bit drawn out, getting to this decision. I mean, to be honest though, that being said, that's probably really benefited the vibes and appearance of how Welsh Labour are looking, because I'm not for 1 second suggesting that Eluned Morgan is who Keir Starmer is thinking of when he's making his policy decisions. I would be surprised if that was the case, but my sort of view of what I'm trying to say here is when the 2-child benefit cap was officially announced that Labour were going to be sticking to that deal a few months ago, Eluned Morgan was a vocal opposition to this, and a lot of the Welsh Labour members in the Senedd were opposing it. There were some Welsh Labour MPs who were opposing it. Steve Witherden from a North Wales MP local to me was one of them too. But so there was that opposition within Welsh Labour. Whether that had a tangible impact on the eventual decision to lift the cap, I would honestly really confidently say it didn't. But if we go back into the general sense of content between Welsh Labour and UK Labour, it probably helped that there was some distance between the two, between the initial announcement and then the lifting of the cap. Because I think Eluned Morgan can sort of confident, because it doesn't look from the point of view of the UK government that they've let Welsh Labour have too much of a sway, which is kind of, it seems to be what they're aiming for in life right now. So that's good for them, I guess.
Well, especially right now, of course, because Eluned Morgan is trying to emphasise this red Welsh way that she's trying to portray, which is basically clear red water version 2, to be more left and more pro-devolution than the right wing of the party and those that primarily occupy the Welsh Labour Parliamentary Labour Party. Now, the Labour Party suspended, of course, 11 MPs across the UK, 11 of their UK MPs when they voted against the abolition of the two-child benefit cap, and that was only earlier this year. I think the force by which the UK government changes policy is concerning almost. It waits for a backlash, like you've mentioned, in order to wait to change policy. And it's a policy, I think, a policy change which will be so impactful. 20,000 children lifted above the poverty line will be transformational. The Welsh Government in 2016 promised to eradicate child poverty by 2020. It did not materialise, of course, and child poverty since has gone up. Of course, we had a UK government which was Conservative during that period. But I think it took so long for Welsh Labour to be able to mobilise to get the UK government to move on this, if you want to even credit them with that, has been shameful. I think one of the priorities should have been to lift the two-child benefit cap at the last budget. But looking at other areas of the budget as well, £505 million for the Welsh Government, which is significantly less than the 1.7 billion that the Welsh Government was given by the UK Government at the last budget. I was quite surprised to see how little money was generated for Wales, and this was the bare minimum that was made available to Wales through the Barnett formula, which gives a proportion of whatever extra cash is spent on England to Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland. I do think that Jo Stevens has been lacklustre in her attempts to push on the UK government to provide more funding. I think 505 million is not much compared to the investment that is particularly needed. If we think about the money that's given to the Welsh Government and the pressures on local services, particularly councils and in social care, I think far more needs to be done, and I think reform needs to be far wider. It's not the only area that Jo Stevens has attracted criticism for, of course, as well, within the wider divides within Welsh Labour. She reportedly boycotted an investment summit held by the Welsh Government because she wasn't given a keynote speaker role.
Wait, that is really surprising.
Yeah.
I didn't know about that. And I'm actually kind of surprised because it felt Rachel Reeves was there doing a speech, I'm 99% sure. And also, it was, of all the events you see the Welsh Government and Luna Morgan doing, it felt like there was a really, really big effort to push, to make this event seem very, honestly, for want of a better word, snazzy. It looked elaborate, it looked fancy, it looked kind of modern and impressive. And at least, whether that was a successful campaign, I don't know, but I know that you could tell, there was a concerted effort being put into this. So that's really surprising that wasn't something Jo Stevens wanted to give support for, because it seems like I've also seen questions coming up in the Senedd all week where you're trying to see Welsh Labour actually trying to support this investment summit. They're sort of using it as a big platform to say this is us putting money into businesses and Welsh growth, right?
Well, absolutely. One of Jo Stevens' main sort of focuses in her time at the Wills office has been investment in the economy. So it's really surprising and poor, I think, for her not to have attended at all. Whether the report of her boycotting because she wasn't given a keynote speech is true or not is irrespective of the fact that she didn't turn up. They sent Anna McMorrin, who is the junior minister in the Wills office.
Yeah, and Anna McMorrin's only just been in the position. It sort of looked better. I mean, the thing is as well, my approach to these sort of things is always I should say this now, my approach to politics is very vibes-based and aesthetic-based. I'm very much looking at what you can see more as opposed to what everyone's saying and stuff. I'm very superficial basically. But I think I was always thinking about at the investment summit, I was it was a very vibes-based event, right? And when you have when you're inviting all these businesses and I don't know, again, this is a very, maybe not the correct way of saying this, businesses and fancy business people coming from across the world to come to it's the ICC, I think, outside of Cardiff. It's very traditional in these sorts of events that you do have high-ranking ministers there. And for one of the most senior politicians in Wales not to be there, and to send a junior, her, like, what would the correct phrase be, her second, who again is like not been in that role very long. It doesn't give like prestige, right? And prestige is kind of what you want to be showing at that point.
Absolutely. I think it's really important as well to have these sorts of summits where we can have, investment into Wales and bring all these companies in that do add value to society and to the economy. But as you've
Yeah,
said, the problem is if you don't have the Secretary of State for Wales turning up, I think it really shows a problem and a divide within the party as well. But as you've mentioned, you did have high ranking ministers there. You had the Chancellor there, Peter Kyle, the Technology Secretary, was there.
yeah, and I think the thing is, like, if we come back to like who does this really impact, right? Like, at the end of the day, I feel like the average person really won't give one that Joe Stevens has not showed up to the Wales Investment Summit. But what this does point to is, I think, just like the tension in Welsh Labour, right? That like what is clearly like a big project of like the Welsh Government and Luna Morgan's Welsh Labour does not have like this pure basis of support. And I feel like, I know we had like lots of stories coming in Welsh politics like over the last few days, but to me, like the overarching narrative is like this tension going on in Welsh Labour. And I think that is something that, while we might not see it directly, like it is what is going to impact like most people in their daily lives, because this tension now is what is going to lead electorally to a very, well, it could very much lead electorally to a really poor show for Welsh Labour when we get to the Senedd elections in May. And that is what's going to impact who our next government is. At the end of the day, if Welsh Labour doesn't perform a certain amount of way, they are going to be, there's a chance that they like will really impact how the next government is formed, because if Plaid Cymru is the biggest party on the left in the Senedd, they're going to have to be making a deal with we can safely assume other parties on the left. Welsh Labour is going to be these parties that these sort of like this sort of like tension and animosity and drama happening in Welsh Labour. I know on our socials we do colloquially call it drama, and because it is at the end of the day, but there is a wider importance that this is ultimately really going to influence the next government, like how the mood is within the party. Because if the party can't do an everyday function of an activity that genuinely benefits them, like this Wales Investment Summit is going to benefit Welsh Labour because they can brag about it. Like, we can see that they want to brag about it because they've had really good communications about it going forward, about the going out about this summit. So they clearly want it to benefit them. If they can't even get it together on something that benefits them, well, how are they going to do? That doesn't bode well for a strong election campaign.
I mean, we've talked on the podcast before about how poor the communications within Welsh Labour have been to the public, and I think it started to improve a little with the investment summit. But you're absolutely right. This could be a massive, massive thing for the Wills office to be shouting about. But Joe Stevens has decided not to go. It's not the only point of contention as well. The letter that was sent by 11 members of the Senedd, Welsh Labour members of the Senedd, to the Prime Minister, criticising the UK government for its handling of the Pride in Places programme, accusing it of undermining devolution and not progressing further devolution as well. It was signed by 11 members, around half of which are standing down next election. But it's a third of the Labour Senedd group, no less.
Yeah, and I feel like we're calling it a letter, but let's be honest, this is a very passive-aggressive message. I'm trying to think of what the alternative would be for like, if it were like you and me being like passive-aggressive to each other in this form. But honestly, I think it would just be like putting out a tweet, like bitching about, can we swear on the podcast?
Yeah, go on.
Yeah, we're going to swear on our podcast. Take that. I don't know if they swore last episode, but sorry, that's what happens when I'm joining the podcast. I stop giving one instantly. But it'd be like me just putting out a tweet bitching about what you're doing when you're going around saying all the time, like, me and Maddie work together great. Like, it's so passive aggressive. And it also, like, it's just not gone down well. And it's so awkward as well, because so they put out this letter, right? And, we can go on about how it's a formal written letter to Keir Starmer. Keir Starmer's not going to see this letter, but who is going to see it is, like, the wider UK media. And what's been surprising is, I mean, this type of thing's happened before. And, like, unfortunately in Wales, like sometimes we don't really, a story's not a story unless it gets picked up by the UK media, because a lot of the way like Welsh people access their news is through like UK only platforms. And, if we're gonna do a little plug for Senedd Explained, hence why we started Senedd Explained. But so a lot of so as I was saying before I got distracted by my own promo, is that so if we imagine everyone in UK in Wales experiences like Welsh news through the UK media, it's sort of only stuff that gets picked up by the UK media that sort of like registers and has importance. But this is really bad for Keir Starmer. To be honest, I didn't expect this to get picked up by the wider UK media, but it did. BBC News and all the other like not niche, all the other like traditional places of UK politics news were reporting on this, and this is why actually Keir Starmer and UK Labour probably would have noticed it a bit more.
Yeah.
So awkward as well, because also like imagine you are like so you go to Senedd, like what, you go like 3-4 times a week and you sit in meetings and debates, and like Aluna Morgan, Welsh Government, a lot of people in Welsh Labour have to say, we're Welsh Labour, we're friends, we're trying to achieve this and we're doing a good job. And then like at least, was it 11? I've already forgotten my number.
11.
At least 11 people in this room have like gone rogue a few days before and like said that they're not doing that. That is so awkward and embarrassing and hard to like maintain that like what you're saying is actually true when people who should, when the basic people, when your bare minimum of support has already left you, like it is just awkward, and it's made even worse by the fact that other people have cared.
Well, absolutely. I think as well the level of publicity it got, it will make Keir Starmer and Joe Stevens and the right wing of Labour see this as a problem rather than an alarm bell. They will see it as something to be dealt with rather than something to be acknowledged and rationalised.
Why do you think that?
Well, I think they'll want to double down. I don't think they'll see it as a sign that maybe things aren't going great electorally as well. As in,
sorry, I was going to say, I guess we can assume that like Welsh Labour has already asked nicely, right? That like everything that Aluna, because Aluna Morgan's constantly saying like, I've had these conversations with the UK government. So if them not asking nicely hasn't resulted on anything, is that why you sort of think that?
Well, yes, but also I think the right of the Welsh Labour Party, which includes most of the Parliamentary Labour Party in Wales, is ignorant almost of the fact that they are electorally dying. They've just lost a by-election in an area that they have been winning for over 100 years. That they have really dwindled on delivery within public services, and that people want to see more investment in Wales. And I think the narrative coming from the Wales office and the lines are that there's plenty of money given, that two governments working together on both sides of the M4. Those sound bites are all very well and good, but the reality is it's not working. As one candidate mentioned to me, that the idea that you could double down and say that actually it's the electorate's fault that we're not doing well, or that they're not understanding what we're doing. And I think this is exactly the type of thinking which is why Welsh Labour are doing so badly, is that the right of the Welsh Labour Party and Number 10 will see this letter and see it as a problem, as people complaining, rather than an accurate diagnosis of what is going wrong with their politics and with their way of governing. And I think that's what will ultimately lead to their demise next May, which I think could be salvage a little were they not going down this path.
Yeah, so it was funny. I think it's funny as well because, like, I don't know, funny, probably not funny for everyone involved, but I was thinking about how actually it's kind of been a week of like Welsh Labour L's, because especially for like the right of Welsh Labour that tends to be associated with the UK government, because at the start of this week, was it the start of this week? No, at the end of last week, we heard a pretty reliable rumour, and by reliable rumour, like people who know, journos who know way more than us, came out swinging, being like, Vaughan Gething is going to join the House of Lords. And Vaughan Gething was Wales's previous First Minister, and and I feel like his like time as First Minister is probably like the big root of all the like Welsh Labour drama we're experiencing right now. He should we do a brief recap? Yeah, let's do a brief recap. Do you want to do the brief recap so you get it correct?
Yeah. So he lasted 118 days as First Minister, which is 2.4 Liz Trusses, and he
the best type of math to calculate.
Of course, he accepted a donation of £200,000 from Dorset Environmental Group,
which is honestly, even before we get onto this environmental group, it's just weird. Like, in Welsh politics, you don't even be needing donations that big. It's just not the vibe.
Especially for a Welsh Labour leadership race.
Yeah, sorry, not even for like a good election. I mean, it's a good election. He wants to be First Minister, fair enough. But not even for like an election where people care. Again, sorry, this is so dismissive of me. People care. But like, do they really? Do people outside like this niche group of people who care about Welsh politics like know that the Welsh leader leadership, do you know, I'm going to rephrase that because I'm being so dismissive. I can't remember what I said, but I was going to say it's a weird donation because it's not even for like, you know, the type of election many people contesting. There's one other person contesting this election. I can't remember how much Jeremy Miles like got donated, but oh my god, it was not £200,000. £200,000 is just weird. Like, we can go on and justify all like the reasons and give you all the reasons that were justifying it at the time, but it's just not commonplace for that type of leadership election. I know it's for the position of First Minister, but at the end of the day, it's still sort of an internal party election, and £200,000 is a huge amount of money for Welsh politics. Insane.
Well, yes, the cap was 50,000, I think, and I think Jeremy Miles also breached it to 57,000, I think. But there's no.
Oh, so there was a rule that you couldn't spend.
Yeah, like, but it was enforced essentially.
So it was like.
Yeah,
it was
and in terms of the amount, you know, I think the right of the Labour Party really wanted to control Welsh Labour going into the period where they would be governing, but that eventually led to another scandal regarding a leak which was alleged to have happened via Hannah Blythen, which she denied and was subsequently fired by Vaughan Gething. In the end, 4 of his ministers resigned from his cabinet, which ultimately meant that he had to resign himself as well. So that's...
Yeah, I think it's worth saying, before you carry on actually, Gwion, I think it's worth saying that we're saying these 4 ministers resigned. These 4 ministers resigned after... Okay, so Vaughan Gething, the timeline here is Vaughan Gething gets elected. Even in the election campaign, this criticism of this donation has started, right? Because as well, what we didn't mention before is that the company that donated to him have they been indicted for environmental war crimes? Yeah, so big stuff. But also, so that donation was given by not just a weird donation, a donation given by like, you know, a not great company. Then then Vaughan Gething was elected as First Minister. Then the general election was called. And this is what's crazy, is you would think a general election would be enough to distract like from Vaughan Gething. But no, we come out the other side of, I don't know, like 3 months, felt like a lifetime, a 3-month general election period. 3 months could be so wrong because like it just felt like a lifetime. But we come out the other side of a general election period and it is still there. The Vaughan Gething story is still there. But at this point, it genuinely feels like, I'd say maybe it's been like 6 months of nothing getting done in the Senedd because everyone was just so mad at Vaughan Gething and like so confused, and this issue was just getting raised again and again and again. And actually, so by the time the 4 ministers resigned, it had been ages of this, and it was so drawn out. And this is why I actually, sometimes when I look back at like Welsh politics, I've got a foggier memory about like events that have gone on. But as I said earlier, like I'm a very vibes-based person. I remember I can't remember if it was Leslie Griffiths or Julie James. They'd said that like we just can't go on like this any longer. They said that, not quote by quote, by the way. That was me phrasing it my
Paraphrasing.
way. Yeah, but they were like, we can't go on like this any longer. And I think that's what was stunning about what happened with Vaughan. It was like the timeline, it just went on forever. And in the end, they like, I feel like, and this is again like me speculating here, but you can't go on like this. Like you have to put an end to this constant like questioning and nothing getting done because no one believes in each other. But like that tension went on for so long that you can really, really understand the rifts in Welsh Labour now, because I just cannot emphasize like nothing was achieved in that time. Yeah, I know. I was thinking that I'd cut that earlier.
Yeah. Well, that's a brief recap for you of the events that led to his resignation.
Yeah, it was so brief and everything.
But reflecting on that, it created a huge divide, which we've seen since, between Vaughan Gething's right-wing, less pro-devolution, and the Jeremy Miles camp, which is more left-wing and more pro-devolution. But it was mooted that Vaughan Gething would be put forward for a peerage this week in the Times, and it transpired yesterday that he was not put forward for a peerage to go to the House of Lords by Keir Starmer alongside other political appointees, which I think is really significant.
Really surprising. I was really surprised.
I think it's surprising that they had the courage to put it forward the first time, given how shaky Keir Starmer's government is now. It's fundamentally not healthy to reward failure and bad behaviour within politics, and I think putting someone like Vaughan Gething forward would send the wrong message. And it's good to see that Keir Starmer's reneged on that decision for now. Whether he'll come at a later date is still unknown.
See, I didn't have that view of like that was why Keir Starmer didn't.
No, I don't think that's why he did it. But reflecting on the fact that they were feeling that he was able to put Vaughan Gething forward for a period, that the thought came about is troubling. Our political culture.
You're just saying it makes you happy.
Yeah. Well, I mean, our political culture shouldn't reward people like him. As in, they shouldn't reward people who have failed in leadership, who have executed bad decision making, and who have been fundamentally dishonest.
The thing is, so my view to this is a tiny bit different. I don't think, from the perspective of UK Labour, that they thought Vaughan Gething failed. I think they're probably just blaming like, Welsh Labour for it. And from their point of view, I do think it's pretty standard to offer a former First Minister like a place in the House of Lords. Like, I mean, I can't remember Mark Drakeford's exact response. We all know he won't do it. He always laughs when you ask him, are you going to go in the House of Lords? But like, it's always been there, right? That it's sort of a standard thing to do after you've had a prominent role in British politics, to then sort of like get offered a peerage.
Well, I'd say that, Keir Starmer promised to scrap the House of Lords when he was leader of the opposition. That obviously has now not materialised.
Oh yeah, that's not.
There are obvious gains to be made by having Lords on your side, especially when he wants to push through so much legislation. And you're right in saying that it wasn't principles or the idea of integrity in public life that prevented them eventually from putting Vaughan Gething forward for a peerage, but it was a fact that there would have been a backlash. And I think a lot of his aides realised that Wales actually has got a political significance to the UK, not least with next May 10th election. So rewarding someone as politically toxic as Gething would have been bad. Joe Stevens, again, of course, lobbied for a peerage for him reportedly as early as last year. Just a month after he resigned. Which again I think shows the mindset which has led to this demise of Welsh Labour, and has capitulated the right of the Labour Party.
I was thinking that if I were Joe Stevens, like Vaughan Gaffin's a prominent person in Welsh politics. He's obviously going to step down in that Senedd election. It sort of makes sense. It sort of probably looks as a she's doing a good thing to her, right? Because if she doesn't view that Vaughan's done anything wrong, then it can kind of be like, oh look, we're helping Wales by getting another Welsh voice in the Lords. It's so controversial when someone joins the Lords. It's a difficult one because so when the rumours about Vaughan came out, I was kind of wondering, is anyone going to say anything? But no one really said anything from a political party in Wales because because even parties such as Plaid Cymru that are opposed to being in the Lords, the second you go out and oppose like the Lords, everyone like zooms in and be like, well, why have you got a member who's joined the House of Lords? And it's just annoying. Like it feels like you can't really win. So it definitely feels like you can't really win. Hence why I feel like it just made sense. Hence why I do see how it would have been really beneficial for Joe Stevens to lobby for Vaughan Gaffing. Like, you know, they're from the same side of the party. She can then say it benefits Wales, and she probably doesn't view it as that bad a thing, you know?
They're good friends, of course, as well. They used to be partners together at a law firm before they entered politics.
Oh, I did not know.
Yeah, I think this whole scandal sort of embodies what is wrong with the thinking of Welsh Labour that has led to their electoral demise. I think it'll probably lead to their electoral demise next May as well. They'll probably double down on what they did during the Caerphilly by-election, and it all embodies the huge divide that's happened between the left and the right in Wales.
What do you mean by like what Welsh Labour did during the Caerphilly by-election?
Well, I think it's the thinking that you can double down on your record in government, that you don't particularly portray a red Welsh way, even if Alina Morgan tried to. You had loads of Welsh Labour MPs on the ground. They had a really poor comms campaign. And I think the way they reflected on it since, I think, has been more telling. The way that they've not reflected on any of the points, which are entirely valid, made by Plaid Cymru, particularly in relations to things like coal tips, into funding, but to double down and say, well, actually, no, it's the electorate that were wrong in not understanding what we were wanting, I think embodies the type of thinking and crystallises why the electoral demise will continue next May.
Okay, I get you. And yeah, I agree. It doesn't seem to be changing. And again, it all comes back to sort of the drama in Welsh Labour, right? Because and this is where I think what this letter that the 11 MSs was sort of getting at, which was we need to change up our approach. We need to think of Wales. And it's sort of a way, without saying it, of being like, you know, I don't think they'd have sent that letter if the election wasn't coming up. I think it's definitely a cry. You can't not read it as a cry for help to ahead of the election because, yeah, as you said, like Welsh Labour is definitely. Welsh Labour, UK Labour, Labour in general are in a precarious position, and nothing seems to be changing. Like, and what seems to be, you know, the people that are changing it just seem to be that want changes on either side just seem to be clashing, right?
Absolutely. And with the talk of an election coming up, another significant development has been the budget agreements between Welsh Labour and Plaid Cymru. The Caerphilly by-election loss for Welsh Labour meant that they had lost their effective working majority, which they had for passing budgets through Jane Dodds. They needed at least one more member in addition to Jane Dodds. So
working majority basically means like you got enough members in the Senedd to pass any like stuff you want to pass.
So that meant that they had to find another party to work with. The Conservatives were in negotiations, so were Plaid Cymru and Russell George, the independent member for Montgomeryshire. And it transpired that on Tuesday that Plaid Cymru and Welsh Labour have reached a deal. 300 million of extra funding was agreed, with £113 million for councils and money for the NHS, and also money for the next government after the Senedd election. And this is in exchange for Plaid Cymru abstaining on the budget so that it will pass. Now, I think this is really, really interesting because Plaid Cymru have been saying that they want to replace Labour in their electoral messaging, which has cut through to quite a lot of people and resonated with a lot of people. And what will be difficult for them now is to spin this as as wanting to replace Labour at the next election as well. There's a very valid argument behind why they did it, of course, because had it not passed the budget, it would have reverted to 75% of this year's budget, which would have been awful for public services. So, it was the right thing for Plaid Cymru to do, to step in and pass the budget. But I think for them, what will be politically difficult for them now is how to portray themselves as an alternative to Labour when they've just passed a budget for them, even if it was for the right reasons.
So I don't agree necessarily saying it was for the right reasons. All of the parties wanted to help pass this budget. Anyone could have come in and said, "Hey, Labour, we can help you pass a budget." It's just because I feel like you saying, sorry, we're gonna argue. I feel like you saying for the right reasons is sort of feels like a very safe thing to say. At the end of the day, anyone can come out of that budget and said, we helped pass a budget because it was otherwise going to destroy Wales. Yeah, but it was always going to destroy Wales if no one agreed. But someone would have agreed, because Welsh Labour would have been in the worst position ever if they didn't pass this budget. They were going to get a pass. It's just the more question was who with, right? So what I'm finding interesting is that Plaid did go with Labour, because I found it really surprising as well. I thought Plaid, because the main message that has been used to attack Plaid from the Conservatives and from Reform is that they're basically the same as Labour, because the mood in Wales electorally is that everyone's a bit annoyed and sick of Labour. So if we conflate Plaid with Labour, then there might be an avenue where we get rid of support for Plaid. So, it's kind of a good tactic for Reform and the Conservatives to be using. But that's why I was really, really surprised that Plaid passed a budget. So I feel like, to be honest, I wonder if Plaid have come out of this in a risky position because of this. I think I'm a bit surprised. So let's just recap quickly the other options Welsh Labour had to pass this budget with. So they could have made a deal with Jane Dodds and Russell George MS. That's who I thought it was going to be. That would have probably been a very localised deal to their area of Gwion. Montgomeryshire, as they've sort of got the area in common, and it's good because it's not a major political affiliation, especially if you're splitting it between an independent MS and a Lib Dem. Then the Tories had said to Welsh Labour, this was the big headline of the budget negotiations, we will make the deal with you to pass a budget if you abolish stamp duty on houses, which is Gwion.
It is a tax paid on houses bought, and it is currently being floated as a policy idea by Kemi Badenoch in the European Parliament to abolish it completely. Hence why Darren Miller is pushing for its abolition.
Yeah, it's a very pro-homeowner, people that can afford...
low tax, yeah.
Yeah, low tax, pro-homeowner sort of policy. I wouldn't say it encourages people who have struggled to access to housing to improve that, but what it does encourage is a certain breadth of economically comfortable people to enable access to owning housing a bit more. So that's sort of what the policy is. Welsh Labour said, no, we're not going to do that, but we will sort of make things a bit... What did they say? They sort of said we'll make buying houses a bit easier in some sort of shape and capacity.
They wanted to... and there was help people get on the property ladder.
Okay, so I wasn't even close.
Yeah.
But yeah, so they sort of gave them... They said yes but no, basically. But it definitely wasn't a yes, because like we said, the Welsh Conservatives campaign, offered a very dramatic policy. To be fair, I think they played the budget really well. Fair dues to the Welsh Conservatives. They got a good headline from it. They were first in with the deal. Now, more people have a very clear idea of this, what they want. They look in sync with their Westminster counterpart. So, well done to them, played that well. Plaid Cymru were only revealed to be in negotiations around this time last week, a few days ago, it was definitely like a lot closer to the announcement than the Tories, which was another reason why I thought, oh, they won't come through. And yeah, so as Gwion said earlier, like all the things they've gotten from the budget, it's more, and I think what's interesting is that they've sort of, again, a bit more passive aggression happening in Welsh politics, but they sort of said, we're not going to vote for it, we just won't, we just will abstain, which is peak enabling mode. But it's I guess they can turn around when when Reform and the Conservatives come run in, they can and say you're the same as Welsh Labour. They can be like, well, actually, we abstained. I mean, it's not the same, because if they use that argument, then they can turn around and say, well, we didn't make the deal at that logic. So it's a bit rogue, but so they definitely did make some sort of effort to not appear to be as friendly as they are with Welsh Labour. But there we go. I think, to be honest, the person who comes off best in this is maybe Welsh Labour. Wales isn't going to go into disaster because we have no money. Ideal. But then also, there's a very good chance, we mentioned earlier in the podcast, that Welsh Labour might be playing a leading role, not leading, but will be playing some role in forming the government in the next Senedd. Well, putting, a recent collaboration attempt in memory, kind of puts in some good blood, good energy between the two parties. So, good for Welsh Labour. They've done a good job. I think the real loser is Jane Dodds. She probably must be really upset because she did really well the last budget. She got a really good policy with the £1 bus travel. It's been lauded a lot. So, to not be involved in negotiations must be sad for her this year.
Yeah, and as we get closer and closer to the Senedd election, only 5 months away now, I think we'll see these budget deals being part of the election sort of slogans.
Oh God, yeah, I'm already sick of it.
Yeah, and only 5 months to go. Thank you for listening to the second episode of the Senedd Explained podcast. I've been Gwion.
I've been Maddy.
And thank you ever so much again for listening. If you do want us to cover any topics that you'd like us to explain or explore, please do reach out on our social media. Thank you for listening and see you next time. Diolch yn fawr.
And follow us on Senedd Explained.
Absolutely. Diolch.
Bye.